Hello and you're welcome to the Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler. Now, as the US presidential election approaches, many in Silicon Valley are drifting over to the Trump camp. This includes at least one high-profile Irish tech founder who attended a lavish fundraiser for Trump and posted thumbs-up photos with him. Today we're going to look at some of the background to this, who's in the Trump camp, who's in the Biden camp, and what this says about the tech industry and about Silicon Valley. I'm joined now by JJ Clark, who's back in Dublin. And JJ, I've been in the US for the last 10 days, and I can feel the shift in sentiment here. I can feel the polarization, not only among the big guns, the tech leaders, but also among the younger cohort, people, juniors, interns who are working in companies who are taking their cues here. But I guess a good place to start is with Intercom's co-founder, the Irishman Owen McCabe.
Yeah, I'm very interested. So for, the tech initiated people will know Owen McCabe, but for those outside that circle, who is Owen McCabe and why is he being kind of courted by the Republican side there in the run up to the election?
Well, Owen McCabe is one of the best known Irish tech founders in the ecosystem here. He co-founded a company called Intercom, which is essentially a customer service, customer support help company, very well documented. It's a unicorn, which means it's a private company that's worth over $1 billion. I've interviewed him several times. He's a very interesting character. He's a lot of energy. He recently came back as CEO of Intercom, having stepped down to become chairman of that company. And that company seemed to be drifting a little. Owen said that it had done 5 consecutive quarters of declining revenue growth. But he's come back and he has become much more vocal in recent months and maybe even in years at being right of center. So anyone who follows his account on X, formerly Twitter, will see that he regularly reposts fairly kind of right-wing accounts. He would take a more libertarian view of what's happening in the US. He would be at one very frequently with figures like Elon Musk, and he attended a fundraiser for Donald Trump last week, or 10 days ago rather, which was reportedly about $300,000 a head, raised around $12 million. And he posted a thumbs up picture with himself and Donald Trump. And what he said was that this would be a referendum on issues such as war, immigration, and crypto. War meaning the Russia-Ukraine war, which a lot of that wing of politics are very skeptical about. They don't think that the Americans should be supporting Ukraine as much. Immigration, they're pretty hard line on immigration, particularly on the border down in Texas. And crypto. And to me, this is actually the big issue. This is the one reason. We can get into it in a few minutes as to why so many in Silicon Valley are now drifting over to Trump. I think it's actually more to do with crypto than anything else. But that's who Owen McCabe is.
Right. And I'm interested as well, just in terms of that blue wall being breached, so around Silicon Valley, a traditionally sort of democratic space. The move by Owen McCabe and the likes to sort of swing to the Republican side in the run up to election, is it just holding your finger up to the wind and saying this will be better for me as a capitalist entity in the future?
Probably is the answer to that. So I mentioned crypto there. There are a couple of core reasons why people like Peter Thiel, for example, the venture capital investor who made a fortune backing some of the biggest companies, why Elon Musk, why people like Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong. There are a number of reasons why they are over in that side of the political house. But the main one probably is a financial and regulatory one. So if you look at the businesses that they're in, and the causes that they're interested in, and I think a large chunk of this will be true for Owen McCabe as well. They're interested very much in crypto. They're interested very much in less regulation, lower taxes. They have a philosophy which is more around the idea, a libertarian one, that people are responsible for themselves, that you can go out, you can work hard, you can make a success of yourself, and you have a responsibility to do so. And that goes hand in hand with a much more deregulated attitude towards crypto. And it's interesting because Trump himself used to be very anti-crypto. In 2019, 2020, 21, he called it a scam. He said that it was, it wasn't real money. Now, you compare that to what he's done in the last few weeks, at the same time that he's now attracting tens of millions of dollars from tech figures in Silicon Valley. And he now is saying that he will protect crypto, he will boost it. He posted the other day on his own social media network that Bitcoin mining may be our last line of defense against a CBDC. CBDC is a digital currency controlled by a central bank. And he started lambasting Biden for, quote unquote, Biden's hatred of Bitcoin, and saying that that only helps China.
Yeah.
So he has pivoted toward crypto, and he's done it at the same time. I mean, Trump is nothing if not opportunistically smart. And here you have a bunch of people in Silicon Valley who are very pro crypto, who probably have significant investments in crypto business, because that's kind of what it comes down to. And between those investments and their belief that crypto is a kind of a bulwark against issues such as, taxation, regulation, the government being in my affairs, I think that I think that that's a huge part of why so many in Silicon Valley are vocally now supporting Trump.
Yeah, and I think as well, just to even look at the I suppose the appeal made to Democrats in that tweet that Owen McCabe sent. He said, "I spoke with 6 people there, none identified as Republican." So he's almost talking to his former self. There's examples of him, rallying against Trump during Trump's presidency, against the Muslim travel ban. He sort of famously tweeted against it, and now he's doing a 180 and he's mentioning immigration policies as one of the reasons that he's sort of jumping side. Is this, I suppose, is this because of, Intercom's recent investment in AI and how that sits up well hand in glove with crypto?
I don't know is the short answer. I'd be cautious though about connecting those two things. I'm not sure that Intercom's activities are really go hand in hand with what Owen McCabe posts on Twitter about Trump or the Republicans or immigration or war. I think he happens to have a particular set of political views that he's not ashamed about, or he's proud to let everybody know about. I think he believes that he is part of a movement. He's very skeptical about diversity initiatives, corporate diversity initiatives, for example. One of the people who applauded him for his Trump photo was a guy called Jason Calacanis, who is a venture capital investor, fairly well known. He has a very well listened to podcast, couple of them actually. And Owen went on Jason's podcast last week, a few days after he posted the Trump photo, and the two of them took aim at corporate diversity schemes. They discussed the challenges of running companies in today's quote unquote woke environment, and they talked a little bit about how America was currently fighting for its soul. Now, they talked about a lot of other things as well, like the ordinary day-to-day stuff about startups, and a lot of that was very interesting. But that kind of philosophical approach to life and to what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to act, and the issue here, I suppose, it's very unusual for an Irish tech executive to do that. In America, not so much, as we're discussing now. Like Silicon Valley used to be quite a liberal place, or on the face of it, it was. You people like Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff, who's campaigned quite a lot, and who would be very sympathetic on homelessness issues and probably on immigration issues as well. Tim Cook, Apple's Tim Cook, who would be, he's a capitalist, but on the issues that Trump is talking about, he wouldn't agree with him at all. But one of the issues that has sparked all of this as well is a lot of these guys work in and around cities like San Francisco, San Jose, Seattle, Los Angeles. Now, I've spent a bit of time there. I was there last week, around San Francisco, San Jose, and it is a bit of a mess. So the cities are in a very, very rundown, difficult state. If you go into certain areas of San Francisco, the Tenderloin, the Mission District, you'll see not just dozens, but hundreds of people who are absolutely out of it. They're clearly suffering from chronic drug abuse. That then leads to petty theft. It leads to burglary. It leads to a small amount of violence. If you go to a square like Union Square in San Francisco, which is one of the iconic shopping districts, Apple has its flagship store there. Some of those shops have shuttered because they just don't want the hassle of it anymore. So what you have is then you have, say, the most vocal component in San Francisco and in the Bay Area is probably the tech community. And they're now increasingly saying, look, this form of liberal government where everything is tolerated and it's softly, it doesn't work. And just look at our streets. So I think that also plays a large role in why or certainly gives ammunition to those who argue that you need to go a different way. You need to go a more libertarian, sort of a harsh way, a more law and order kind of way. And I think that's the agenda that we're seeing a lot of these tech founders sign up to.
Yeah, and I want to, I suppose, linger on the fact that like the rhetoric that a lot of these, I suppose, newly minted Republican tech founders are using. It's sort of like you mentioned at the outset, Owen McCabe talking about rejoining the fold as CEO because there has been mediocrity in his new investment announcement a month ago. He was talking about there's no place for mediocrity and winning winning in this space takes aggression on all fronts. It's sort of I mean it's a Nietzschean idea. It's like what you're talking about, that no one's taking responsibility. You see that quite a lot from these newly minted Republican tech founder types, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would defer to your apparent expertise on Nietzsche there. I'm not sure if you can superimpose one exactly over the other, but I get what you're trying to make. And yeah, there is a back to basics element about what's being discussed here, which is to say that, as I understand it, this is as I understand it, that life has become too wound up in itself. It's become too complicated. We're overthinking everything. We're trying to weave too many social rules into the basic stuff of getting on with things and making a success of a business. So I think it was Brian Armstrong of Coinbase, CEO of Coinbase, the big crypto company. He was the first, as far as I'm aware, prominent tech leader to take issue with that and to rewrite the rules of a company. Because for years we had a gradual movement where big tech companies in particular, and then other big companies after that, they paid a lot of attention and put a lot of energy into inclusion and diversity initiatives for good reason, to try and give minorities, people who normally wouldn't get a leg up in these huge, big, rich companies in an era where so many of them were making unusually large profits. So it wasn't really a kind of a normal environment, certainly in terms of profitability or revenue. Now that it has become a bit more cutthroat, you seeing a portion of those companies say, we actually don't have the ability, or we don't think we have the ability to do that anymore. One tech company in the last week came out with a new company creed, which was to replace DEI, which is a diversity acronym, with MEI, which the M stands for meritocracy. So replacing diversity for meritocracy. Now that gained a lot of plaudits from some of the right of center tech folk on X and elsewhere. But that's the drift of a large part of the industry here. There's a kind of a feeling that, there's an attempt to equate diversity to sexism and racism, that if you promote somebody because they are from a background which doesn't normally get promoted, that equates to racism. So that's quite an that's I mean that's a pretty contentious suggestion, but it's definitely one that chimes with the Trump ethos, which very much appeals to a a kind of an aggrieved, probably white sensibility, although not. I mean, Trump has many non-white supporters,
Right.
but his appeal uh, is
Is to
very
that
strong
sensibility.
among among a kind of white cohort who feels that everybody else is getting ladders and they're not. They're assumed to be the you know the colonizer, the ones who don't need any help,
Yeah,
and
oppressor oppressed
yeah,
relationship. And
all of that. Yeah.
I'm interested, I suppose, just to come back to the, it's going to be made about a freedom of speech sort of, that you should be able to, in a civil democracy, be allowed to follow whoever you want, and that would be the pushback from the other side. Like Owen McCabe, for example, he had to have known that when he posted that photo with the thumbs up and on Twitter, that it was going to spark outrage. You have liberal journalist Cara Swisher, she's formerly of Vox, I think,
Yep.
posting to her 1.5 million followers, about what this means. So, what do you think his intent was there? Was it to signal to people that are sort of the floating middle to sort of join ranks, or was
No,
it was it
I
to
don't think
like
so,
cause a
and
stir?
I don't think so. I think he believes he wants to make a contribution. So, and by the way, it wasn't just Cara Swisher. The movie star John Cusack
Mm.
absolutely lashed him out of it on Exford. I don't think Owen McCabe really cares very much. He went into this in a bit with Jason Calacanis in his podcast. He said was, look, 10 years ago, I was a lot more sensitive about all of this stuff. Now, I believe that, he believes he's doing it in good faith. And if he says that, you have to accept that that's his intention, that it's good faith. He believes that he is articulating a view that needs to be aired, and that he's trying to, contribute to a philosophy for things to be done better. I mean, that's what I'm talking about there is what I hope most of us, all of us, believe that we do when we say anything political. As for the outrage, yeah, there were definitely a lot of raised eyebrows, a lot of commentary. We've about half of this podcast, most of this podcast now, we've talked about it, so it has sparked a conversation. But for me, the more interesting element, other than Owen McCabe, is the fact that this polarization is happening, and that we've moved into an era, largely because I think of Trump and his success, where it's now almost mainstream again to espouse views that 10, 20 years ago would have been considered to be a little bit ugly and maybe a little bit ignorant because of the effect that they have. And that is very much happening in Silicon Valley at the moment.
And are
And
you concerned by that? Do you think this is, you mentioned the polarization, but do you think this will have a telling effect on the coming elections?
well, it will have an effect on the elections insofar as literally the tech industry is now raising tens of millions for Trump, largely based, I think, on his promises around crypto and regulation. So Trump is saying that he's going to support crypto, and he is going to be against more regulation for tech businesses. So California is doing its best to follow the European Union at the moment in terms of regulating tech on a whole number of fronts. In Europe, we regard this as necessary. We regard it as proper guardrails so that companies don't abuse their customers and everything else. In the States, it's regarded with much more squinty eyes. They talk about Europe as the place where innovation goes to die. Obviously, we disagree as Europeans. We think you actually have to have rules, otherwise companies will just run riot. Um, but they have raised, and they're continuing to raise now, a fair bit of money for Trump. So it will have an effect on the election. It's not that because Owen McCabe says something, or Jason Calacanis says something, or Brian Armstrong, or Peter Thiel, anyone else. Peter Thiel is actually taking a back step from politics, away from politics now. It's that they're actually physically raising money for Trump.
Right, and that goes
So
into campaigns and stuff. I'm just to jump in there. With Trump, is he being cute there in terms of aligning himself with Silicon Valley, the kind of agile, young kind of, I suppose, aesthetic? Whereas Joe Biden is talking about regulation. He's putting himself in a very sort of old mode, and we've seen of late Biden, freezing on stage. Is this a sort of, contrasting, by design?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, Trump backing crypto is not just to appeal to, the mega millionaires who have big positions in crypto. It's probably also to appeal to young people, young males in particular, who are quite fond of crypto, who like betting on crypto, who like putting in 100, 500, 1,000, 5,000, $10,000 into crypto. But I mean, we kind of know. I mean, Trump is a real old-fashioned politician. He'll kind of say anything to get elected. He will probably follow through, though, as well. If he thinks there's more money coming from that sector, he will follow through. But it certainly does help his position with in a sector that traditionally didn't like him, the tech sector, and young people. So yes, I think that has helped him quite considerably. Anyway, I think we could go on for a long time in this because we're mixing politics and tech here. But for the moment, I think we'll leave it at that. JJ Clark, thank you for joining the podcast, and you also produced this episode. Rory Bones was on sound. And from the US, where I remain for the moment, this is Adrian Weckler, and you've been listening to and watching The Big Tech Show. We'll talk to you soon.